human intelligence, it will still be needed in the future. So how do you future-proof your career? This is the topic of the last panel of the day, and I hope you have some energy left. And for this, I pass over to Roland Bernhard, who will moderate this session.
Thank you so much, Tanya, and a warm welcome to the panel discussion on employability. There's at least 3 reasons why you should stay on. One is, of course, to get inspiration and best practices, how you stay relevant, in your career over the years. Then also, sort of what skills will be most essential in the future, and also how you build your personal brand. All of that we will hear from top-notch executives and top-notch consultants internationally. And I will introduce the panel in a second. Very briefly to me, I'm Roland Bernhard. I'm an advisor on transformation for leaders and boards all over the world. Previously, I was senior partner in various international consulting companies, and I was also a board member of Red Bull and in executive roles at the Coca-Cola company. So now let me introduce the panel. With me is Werner Koss. He's the country manager of Nokia in Switzerland. Now, everyone knows Nokia from the mobile phones, but obviously that's a business that they sold. Now it's a B2B business, actually the backbone of our telecommunications in many countries. Also, for example, enabling 5G. Maybe in one sentence, Werner, why do we need 5G? As an executive, what do I need to know?
No, 5G is, to make it very short, 5G is the next generation of mobile communication. And very short, the first benefits we will see in a few B2C areas like gaming, for example, where you need real-time communication. And maybe the bigger opportunity is for B2B companies automating their processes using mobile communication in their, let's say, campuses and enabling and automating their processes.
Thank you. So that was the sales pitch for 5G. With us today is also Stefan Steger. He's chairman Austria, Switzerland for Korn Ferry. Everyone knows Korn Ferry, of course, as a premier executive search company, but also important to know, they also do a lot of advisory, leadership consultancy, and organizational effectiveness work. Even that's now bigger than the executive search arm. So warm welcome to you. Stefan, maybe also very briefly, in what situation should I call an executive search consultant like you as a manager? In maybe one sentence?
I think whenever you are concerned you might not have the leadership around yourself that you would like to see, a call might be a possibility.
Okay, got it. Okay, with us online is also Ikechi. She is a partner at Accenture in Paris. Actually, she lives in Paris, but she works mostly in London, and she actually will move soon to Singapore, so a very cross-cultural executive. And maybe quick question to you also in one sentence, what do you look for most moving or relocating to Singapore after Paris and London? Oli? Seems to be a technical problem. Then we move swiftly, and I'm very excited to announce Bracken Darrell. Is he with us?
Not yet.
Not yet, okay. But I see definitely another very important panelist. It's Dr. Annabella Bassler. She's the CFO of Ringier, obviously the biggest media house in Switzerland, and also on the European scale an important media player located in 20 or active in 20 countries. She also initiated Equal Voice, an organization that tries to get more visibility for women in media. And the CEO of Ringier, Mark Walder, is also a driving force at the Digital Switzerland. So warm welcome to you, Annabella.
Thank you.
And also
Thanks
maybe quick question to you, since employability has a lot to do with continuous learning. Maybe can you give me an example what you learned from a colleague or an employee lately that you found interesting for you or valuable? Does something come to mind?
It always just starts with yourself, right? So I think this is something we try to live here at Ringier. Just start leadership with yourself.
Right. I also know that you do something called Feed Your Mind sessions in Ringier. Can you maybe say a few words what that is? Feed Your Mind. What the purpose is and how you do it?
Well, we love those Feed Your Mind sessions because we try to gather teams that are interested in something that is beyond the daily topics they are covering. So it can be whatever. It can be a session on artificial intelligence. It can be a session on leadership. It can be a session on relaxation. So it should not be like not only a business topic, but as well something that has like a holistic approach that we want to share with our employees. And it's part of our lifelong learning program. So we are really proud of it.
And that's so one aspect of how you keep people, upskilled and sort of current with the latest stuff, right? And that's open for all the employees, or?
Yeah, exactly. Everybody is invited. Everybody can be part of it, and everybody is allowed to give ideas what else they want to share.
Topics. That's great. So, which brings me sort of to the next question. Obviously, skills is something very relevant. What are the skills of today and in the future? What's most relevant? And I would like to show you what the World Economic Forum thought are sort of the top 10 skills for 2025. It's a big report they released a few months ago. And let's have a quick look at this list. Also the audience out there, of course. They grouped it into problem solving, self-management, working with people, and technology use and development. And I would love to ask, of course, also people in the panel, what they think is sort of the most important skill in their mind, in their experience for the near future. Of course, if the most important thing is not on the list, please add it. Depends, of course, on the function, etc. But let's have a try, and I start with you, Werner. What did you pick, and why?
Okay. Briefly. Yeah, it's a difficult choice, but I was considering between two options, and finally I decided for the second one from the bottom, which is resilience, stress, tolerance, and flexibility. And for me, these are, let's say, personal qualities which are really needed. And I think it's not maybe something which has not been needed in the past, but I think it will become more and more important, especially flexibility, taking new opportunities, not missing opportunities. I think that's really a key element and a key skill to be developed. And I think, stress tolerance, everything is getting faster, and no need to talk about it. So I think, for me, these are, let's say, features or let's say qualities I try to develop and keep and improve, and they served me quite well.
Yeah, no, it shows and underlines the importance of self-management, right? And that's actually true for all the levels, right? It's important. Also people that are maybe a bit lower in rank than you are, super important. And I'll go on to you, Stefan. What did you pick and why?
Yeah, I'll try to answer the question. I'm not trying to evade the answer here.
Okay,
sure.
With
the answer, but just a few comments. Maybe first the word skill. I wonder whether it's still the most relevant term, because we are living in a time which, at least that's what I observe, where maybe skills i.e. things that you learn over time. They won't go away, no doubt. Yeah? But what has become much more important are the traits of a person, yeah, the beliefs of a person. So that's the first thing. So I don't want to criticize the least per se, but maybe skill is not the not today not the ideal word anymore. And then I would say to the least per se, all the skill, all the categories that they formulated here, that include the why and the how. Yeah, or the why and the who rather. The why and the who. Why do we do something? Who does it? Yeah, there are elements in all of those components, of course. I would rank them more important than the ones where it's more about how do we do something, what do we do? Yeah. So, and if we accept that as a, let's say, as an argument, then probably the leadership and influence, social influencing category that they have there has most of that. Yeah.
I get, so we will get back to the values and some of the stuff that you talked about. Over to you, Annabella. What did you pick and why?
Well, I believe in self-management, as I was exploring earlier. So I do say everything starts by yourself, and I think it's really important that you are a role model in leadership. And I believe, like, the new modern leadership style should always be a combination of ratio and emotion. I do believe that it's really important that you are really clear in your rationalities, in setting the goals, in telling the vision, the mission behind it, but then that you are really open-hearted and really are listening to your teams, that you are encouraging them, and to encourage them to speak up, even though it's against your thoughts. Because why are you hiring the best talents if you aren't listening to them? So I do believe nowadays it's so important to have this combination of ratio and emotion when you are leading.
When you talk about leadership or self-leadership, Werner, you mentioned something very interesting in our pre-discussion, and you said, you can also learn leadership from outside the firm. For example, in your case, you've been a ski instructor before in your life, you've been a mountaineer. No, but it's interesting. So what can you take maybe from those experiences into leadership and in the personal growth?
Yeah, I think if there is an opportunity to take responsibility early in your career, and that's not always easy, but I think that's one of the key, let's say, that's the basis to develop and to make mistakes, and from one side, but to realize it has consequences, and what I learned, and I was lucky in this respect. As you said, I was a mountain guide for about 10 years. So there you have sort of responsibility for life and death. If you make a wrong decision, somebody might get seriously injured or even die. So that's something you have to learn, and I think that's very, let's call it a transferable skill for later on for taking into management. That's not always life and death decisions, but I think they also, you learn to take them and consider the risks. And I think we'll come back maybe to another topic later concerning risk. That's also
that's another one that interests me. I also saw that in previous panels that talked about risk taking and educated risk taking. But I see we have also a new face on the panel. Welcome, Ikechi from Accenture. I already briefly introduced you. So she's a partner, as I said, and she's focusing on business restructuring and innovation. And also mentioned you're a very international executive, right? Working out of London mostly, but living in Paris and soon to be relocating to Singapore. What are you looking forward moving to Singapore? Maybe in one or two sentences, Oli?
Creativity and the unknown.
That fits the topic, yeah?
Yeah.
And what will you take from London and Paris?
I think a lot of cultural appreciation for differences. So being born and raised in London, in the UK, and really spending a lot of my working career in London, and now some of it also in Paris, I have seen the benefit of blending cultures and understanding differences, understanding cultures, both from a personal perspective, but also a business perspective. And I think I'm definitely going to need that in Singapore, where business is conducted quite differently. But I really do look forward to the nuances that myself and my family will be going through.
That will be definitely interesting, to say the least.
Adaptability is key.
Adaptability fits our topic, agility. And one thing I would love to discuss with you, Ollie, is the idea of personal brand. Okay, as we all know, it's not a brand, it's not just BMW or Apple. You can also have a personal brand, right? How you position yourself. And just in a nutshell, it's a big topic, but can you give us a few advices, Ollie, how do you build your personal brand? Very practically, maybe 2-3 steps. Please keep it concise.
No problem. I will try. I think the first thing is identifying the you. So what is the thing that makes you unique? What is your identity? And you've just mentioned a couple of brands. Really try and associate yourself and think about yourself in terms of are you going to be a Volkswagen versus a Nissan versus a Ferrari? So really trying to build some identity in terms of who you are, what you stand for, and why you stand for that, and be willing to dig deep, be willing to actually write things down, speak out loud in the mirror, whatever it is, but actually dig deep and ask yourself the questions in terms of why is it you are wired the way that you are. So that's step one, identifying what you believe is your purpose. I think the next step to actually building a personal brand is very much around actually understanding the various facets around how you can communicate that brand. So not just communication actually, but amplification. So it's all well and good if you believe you are, if in a work context, the best salesperson ever, but do other people think that you are the best salesperson ever? So how can you actually create a brand that actually tells a story? And I think storytelling is a really fundamental thing that goes alongside building a brand. I think the third thing I would also advise is know when to change your brand, know how and when to rebrand. That is super important to stay very relevant. I will pause there on the 3 takeaways, but we can definitely get into more detail.
We will follow up on this, also on the storytelling. Thank you so much. And I see yet another face on the screen. It's Bracken Darrell. Do you hear us, Bracken?
I do. Can you hear me?
Hey, fantastic. How are you?
I'm terrific. Thank you. I apologize for being late. I'm a little overloaded right now.
Okay. But I really appreciate that you could make it. Probably no need to introduce Bracken, but for those who don't know him, he's the CEO of Logitech. And of course, far more than that, he's also a really very, very interesting leader in many respects. And we will get to some of that hopefully in the discussion. Bracken, short question to you, since are you actually in California right now?
I am. Yeah.
Okay, so it's close to Silicon Valley. It's morning over there. Do you actually have sort of a morning routine? You know how you get into the day typically, and if you are willing to share with us.
Oh, sure. If anybody's interested, I mean, I get up very early. I get up about 4 o'clock in the morning, believe it or not, and then I'm usually on calls by 5 or 6. So this is I think this is my 4th call this morning. So I love mornings. I'm a very morning-oriented person, which is helpful because, as you know, our headquarters is in Switzerland, so we have a lot of people in Europe. And then, so I get up and go. The minute my eyes open, my feet are on the floor and I'm moving. I'm one of these people who wakes up very easily. And then by about 8 o'clock at night, you don't want to be around me. I could fall asleep on the floor. You know, I'm easy to sleep and easily to rise.
So, since you're so close to Silicon Valley and also one of your founders, Dennis Darrell, was always very keen of Silicon Valley. Is Silicon Valley actually still the place to go if you look for inspiration, sort of the startup groove, new ways of working, technology? Or do I rather go now to, Tel Aviv or Oslo or Shanghai? What would you recommend?
But when I came here 9 years ago, I was just blown away by the vibe here. Everywhere you go, whether you went to a coffee shop or a restaurant or just in the street, people were talking about ideas. People were dreaming new ideas, trying to get money for new ideas, writing on the back of napkins. You just had this popcorn feel. I think roll forward 9 years, and certainly you do feel that in Tel Aviv, but you also feel it in Berlin and in London. And I think roll forward, the world is so distributed now that you can find that everywhere. Now it's the communities you join that you decide to be a part of. And I don't think there is a certain place to be now physically. And if the pandemic's done anything, it's reminded us that, it's a virtual world and we're all right next to each other if we want to be. I think it's finding your communities and to Ollie's point, really fearlessly trying to be new all the time, join new communities all the time. The inspiration comes from everywhere. And I think variety is kind of one of the key things. Finding new things that slam into the old things you think you already know is probably the key to innovation anyway. And so trying to find those new things is a good idea.
If I could rephrase it, so good inspiration can come from everywhere, both geographically, right, but also, of course, in the organization, right? There's good ideas from everywhere. And key topic, risk-taking. We had at Coca-Cola Company the term of educated risk-taking, which means let's take risk, but let's take no stupid risks. And Werner, you were referring to you in our pre-discussion. Can you maybe tell us sort of a few risks you took maybe and how it would play out, hopefully positively in your career? For example, going abroad, right? Coming out of the comfort zone versus just doing the comfortable thing. Just a few examples, 2, 3 if you have.
Yeah, okay. Let me, maybe 2 examples, not to make it too long.
2 is fine.
No, I think one example is, I think you have to, if you're curious and you want to learn and you want to, let's say, move on, you have to leave your country. It's my feeling, and so I decided after a few years of work and my studies, I need to go abroad. And there came an opportunity either to go to the US or to go to Russia, and so that was a sort of choice. And I'm originally from Austria. And as an Austrian, you have very, let's call it a little bit, I wouldn't call it bad feelings, but you had some respect going over the Iron Curtain at that time to Russia. It was not an Iron Curtain anymore. There was not such a strict border. But it was like, for me personally, it was quite a risk to go somewhere where I didn't know. I didn't even know the language. And I knew basically nobody there. There was just an office. I had to go, and it was a fantastic time for 3 years. It was very hard at the beginning, but then you learn a lot of new things, and if you put a lot of energy in it, you will also be successful. I think that's also a key, not to be there and wait that something happens. You have to put in energy and try to leave a footprint. And that was where I had the opportunity to help contribute building up a plant there in Russia. And maybe the second chance is not so long ago. Recently, I was joining Nokia in Switzerland, and as you said, Nokia was not really and still is not really known what we are doing actually right now. I mean, Nokia was famous for mobile phones, but currently we have let's call it the whole company changed. I think there are in Nokia we have almost 100,000 people and 90,000 people, and maybe 10% of these people worked at Nokia 5 years ago. So it's a total new company, and but we are still in the same business. We're in a telecom business, building up networks. And Nokia in Switzerland had quite a weak position, to be honest, especially on the service provider side. So I got the opportunity to, let's say, turn around the business in Switzerland, which was I had no real idea how to do that, but yeah, I took the chance and it worked out.
No, thank you. These are great examples. And yes, indeed, a great transformation of Nokia. Actually, a $20 billion company, also owning Bell Labs, the ones that invented so many things we use on a daily basis. Stefan, you have been in the executive search and leadership business for many, many years. And I would love to hear from you, what makes a good candidate, because you have seen so many candidates. What I mean about a good candidate is for someone that you can place and someone that is successful in his new role, right? Because that's what people want to have.
That's the ultimate question.
That's the ultimate question. No, but honestly, I mean, if you try to, what's the essence? What do you see? What are the traits? What are the qualities such people have? I'm sure there are some.
There is no right or wrong answer to that, of course. But from the 20 years that I've been working through projects where we were basically in their core selecting executives and the process leading to a final choice, I think one thing and what you do after such a long time, you become much quicker in your, at least I noticed that with me, much quicker in the decision making. Is someone sort of going forward in a process or not, and why? But some basic things, and that's what you're asking, that I really look for is, if someone is not consistent in what they say or what they do, lack of consistency of any sort that I detect or I notice, leads to relatively immediate discontinuation of a process, at least in my case, because I think that is something we cannot live with and should not tolerate. Yeah? You can call it authenticity, you can call it truthfulness or whatever, or honesty, but definitely there's a lot of that around when you go deep. Yeah. So anything that spoils or damages, the way that someone is anchored in the ground, is a complete no-no in my case. Anything else, I think staying fresh, making venturesome career moves makes a lot of sense. Werner described it as risk. I would agree with that. You learn a lot when you expose yourself a lot, particularly in early years. People who had the chance to expose themselves, be it in sports, be it in a profession, be it in the arts or in anything, frankly, that just, gives you a lot of substance. That's what I really love in profiles of candidates, and it can be anything, really. I'll stop here.
No, that's good. I think that's helpful. Maybe I move on to you again, Bracken. One advice you once got, what I found out, is a very unusual advice, and maybe you can spell it out for us what it meant for you. Someone advised you, you clean the windows and wash the floors. That's what I've seen in an interview with you. So can you maybe tell us, this was very unusual, what it means to you, and how did you live up to that?
Yeah, it was an entrepreneur named Sammy Segal. He's Israeli, and I had breakfast with him about 3 weeks before I joined Logitech 9 years ago, and I asked him for advice because he's just a great entrepreneur and a really wise man. The last thing he gave me a bunch of advice, including think twice whether you really want to take this job. But when I got up, he said, I was walking away from the lunch table, and he said, "Hey, one more thing." He pointed at me like this. He said, "You wash the windows and you clean the floors." And I turned around and I smiled, and I turned around and walked to the door. And as I was going down the stairs, I thought, wonder what he meant by that. And the more I thought about it, the more I understood what he meant. He meant two things. One is that, when you own everything, you own absolutely everything from the ground up. It doesn't mean you do everything, but you need to feel that level of ownership. I think it also means that your job's not any more important than anybody else's. I mean, you just have a different job. In my company, everybody's got a responsibility. I have certain things that I'm responsible for, and everybody's job's important. Those super important.
Which brings me to an interesting thing. At Red Bull, we had a value that was like this. It said, "Don't take yourself too seriously." And I thought that was an incredibly good value. And I think some leaders could maybe live up a bit more to this. What do you think about humbleness? And how do you live it, you as a person, and also in your leadership style and in your company?
Is that directed at me?
Yeah, Bracken, you still?
Yeah, humility to me, I associate very strongly with learning. I think people who are humble tend to be strong, hardcore learners, and because people who are not humble tend to think they already have the answers and they don't ask. And if they're challenged, they shut down the challenge pretty quickly. So to me, humility, if it doesn't naturally come with who you are, you need to find a way to get it, because you should be humble. I mean, there's not a person on this panel, I can guarantee you, who doesn't think that they know about 1/1000th of what they'd like to know. And even in the topics in the last year where I thought I was really an expert, I realized I was a novice. I had so much to learn in diversity, equity, and inclusion, in environmental sustainability. I mean, things that I really thought I was pretty good at, or at least that I was one of the good guys. I realized I was not doing my job. And so I think you're always a learner. And, the earlier in your life you realize that, the better. And then the more you're reminded of it throughout your life, the better.
That makes a lot of sense. And I mean, one key word you brought here is diversity, right? And someone that is really, I think, trying to do here an extra job is definitely Ringier. And also Annabella, you personally, as I said in the introduction, with the Equal Voice initiative. Can you tell us a little bit, very concretely, how you try to get diversity into the company, and also maybe even more important, since we talk about employability, what a leader should bring in terms of diversity? How can we, for example, deal with unconscious biases and stuff like that? What can we do as leaders to be more aware and to grow in that respect?
Happy to share my ideas with you. Equal Voice is about how can we make women more visible in media, because 65% of media coverage is about men, so only 25% is left over for women. So me, as a leader of the largest media company in Switzerland, I was just like wondering, and I was questioning the editors-in-chief, and I said, this is not the reality we are showing. So what can we do about it? And when I had all this process, and I will not elaborate any further on Equal Voice, but I will, it was so clear that we had to take it internally, that we said we have to walk the talk internally, because otherwise our journalists would not be motivated to do Equal Voice in our publications, right? So when I was reflecting about it, I went to the CEO and I said, Mark, you know what? I will be responsible for diversity and inclusion. I'm the CFO, and it's a leadership question. It's nothing to delegate to HR. I'm pretty sure HR can handle it perfectly, don't get me wrong, but it gets a deeper purpose. It gets a deeper meaning when it comes from the board directly. It's not something that we are delegating. We just do walk the talk internally, and we start by ourselves. So what does it mean? We, the strategy, it's pretty simple. I love just keep it always as simple as you possibly can do so. So what I said is, first of all, let's define the diversity that we want to have within Ringier. And after having defined this diversity, let's think about how can we hire, retain, and promote those people in order to get to this diversity. So this was really important that we just set the strategy. And then in the second step, I said it's all about inclusion, right? So I asked all the employees, whoever wanted to participate, to be part of this group. And we did 3 virtual workshops, and we had over 100 people to sign up for those virtual workshops, and they wanted to be part of the group in order to define the measures. Because I said we need the right measures, and everybody has to be part of this process who wants to be part, because then we can decide what measures are we going to take and how we are going to put this on a roadmap. And it's so important when you have defined all those measures and we have put this on a roadmap for the next 2 years, is then to communicate and to have everybody engaged in this roadmap and in those projects. And this totally makes a difference. So try to enroll as many people as you possibly can by having a clear strategy, what you are aiming for.
Thank you. We also have a couple of questions from you, the audience. Thank you so much. There was one I saw a few minutes ago about 50 plus. I will get to you in a second, Stefan, about this one. But we also have about ethical leadership. We also have about personal development and growth, which I think we already addressed to some degree. Also with you, Werner. But let's maybe take about the ethical questions and the values. I mean, you also touched a bit about this. But I don't know, Oli, do you want to have a take on this? You know, ethical practice in leadership, how important is this and how can I maybe foster it?
Sure. And I think I want to build on what Annabella was saying just around diversity.
Sure.
Because I think for me, the inclusion bit, the belonging piece, for me is a really, really core part of the armor of any leadership. So whilst I completely agree that we must be setting the direction in terms of making sure we have a company that reflects the communities that we serve in terms of being diverse, it's far more important for me from an ethical standpoint as well as a business standpoint to actually foster a feeling, emotions with your workforce. And by that, I mean, let them feel like this is a family, right? Let them feel like they belong. And I think, and I'm not suggesting Annabelle was going there, but I think to think inclusion is about asking people if they want to be involved in something versus actually fostering an environment where your workforce feel like they can whistleblow, like they can raise their hands if something is done untoward, or they can raise their hand even for diversity in thought and innovation Bracken was talking about earlier as well. So I think for me, that is that aspect around inclusion and also knowing what is right from what is wrong, but also being a very loud, proud advocate for whistleblowing on what is right and what is wrong. And I think that goes not just from a kind of colleague perspective in terms of internally in your organization, but also sometimes it's knowing when to push back even on your clients. So I'm from a management consultancy background. We work with a number of clients. It's very much always, work with our clients and ensure that they're happy. But if they have done something actually that's ethically wrong, either to us, to our teams, to others, then it's our moral obligation to actually call that out. So I think those are important reflections for me.
Good stuff. I mean, it reminds me on some of the leadership principles of Amazon. One is, have backbone, disagree and commit. That just relate, I think, to a little bit what I heard from you guys. Now let's get to this 50 plus question to you, Stefan, because I mean, I totally get it. When you're 30 and you are, in a discussion or a leadership role, people tell you, you lack a bit of experience. All of a sudden you're 50, and then you have too much experience or the wrong experience. So how can you sort of place people that are in their 50s but are fresh or active or up to date? What are sort of the challenges and what can a 50 someone do?
Well, first, I'm a bit worried that you direct that question to me, but anyway. But joking
not because of your age, but because of your expertise.
No, I know.
Just to make it very clear. Yeah.
Well, listen, I think in our work, I don't think we try to factor the age component into our considerations at all.
Okay.
There is, however, of course, something related to age, or there may be, which has to do with how much energy do you still have in yourself as you go forward. Yeah? And I think that for me, if anything, in the age, let's say in that age discussion, is for me the most important, because to see that the person has been sustainable in their own development, in the sense that there is enough energy left, or they're refueling, they've found a way to refuel their own energy such that they can achieve what needs to be done, which is exhausting at the end of the day. Bracken gets up at 4 o'clock. How long can you do that? Maybe he does have a certain recipe that gives him.
We will ask him in a minute, so stay tuned.
But that is an exhausting thing.
Yeah,
per
no,
se.
absolutely.
So I think the energy question for me is hugely important. But I can confirm absolutely there are fantastic people who marry a lot of enormously important experience that they have gathered with tremendous energy.
Yeah.
So I don't think we should focus too much on that idea of 50 plus or 60 plus or whatever. Whenever we can, we should do away with it and look at the person and see what is in the person, really.
No, couldn't agree more. But I happily take the ball and throw it to Northern California, over to you, Bracken. So yeah, how do you refuel? How do you stay fresh? In all terms, physically, emotionally, spiritually, intellectually.
Well, I'm this is a topic I just love, because I'm 50 plus, but I've always thought, that I never want to stop working. I will never retire. And I always want to be fresh, and I always want to be objective. After I'd been in this job about 5 years, we had a pretty good run, and the company was so different from what it was the 5 years before when I started, and I was going to bed one night thinking, what's this company going to be like 5 years from now if it's this different? And everything's changing faster. And then I thought, and then it made me wonder whether I was the right person to run the company. So I just kind of decided, I wrote down what I thought the job was required and what the company would be like. And then I thought, you know what? I'd be one of the candidates for it, but probably not the best one, because I hired everybody who's working at the top. I made most of the strategic calls. I was involved in all the products. I thought, for that reason, I probably shouldn't do it. So I decided to quit. So, but I've learned over the last few years to sleep on decisions. So I kind of fired myself. I thought, I'll get up tomorrow morning. I'll tell my chairman, and then we'll figure out a transition plan. I'll give us a year. We'll get the right person in the job. But I woke up the next morning and I thought, you know what? That's the wrong answer. I just need to go down this path of, nothing is sacred. That I've got to just start over again. So I decided to sign a new contract with myself. I'm starting over again, and I went to work that day feeling like a newcomer, and I was pretty tough, just like I was when I started the company in the first place. I made some really tough calls, changed some people out of positions, changed some strategies. Then I told my leadership team the same thing. About 3 months later, I told them what I'd done, and I said, look, I want you guys to do the same thing. You to do the same thing. They aren't guys, it's 50-50. And I said, I want you to do the same thing. I want you this weekend, I want you to fire yourselves. And then I want you to rehire yourself on Monday morning. And if you don't fire yourself, I will, and I won't rehire you, because I want you to be fresh. And I feel now I realize that 5 years is too long, that maybe I should be doing that every year, or maybe we should be doing it every morning. I don't know. It's all right.
Definitely an interesting and very unconventional idea, but it worked. And needless to say, Logitech is on a super run, and not just because of Corona, but also because of a lot of transformations you did and sexy products you guys have and all of this kind of stuff. And one thing that also fascinates me, Bracken, is you ask new employees that join the company to write to you in the first 60 or 90 days, what they think you should change. I think that's a fabulous idea, because people then are invited to be honest, right? Because typically they probably are not. And they want to please, their CEOs and all of this. But here you invite them, you give them a license to kill, as James Bond would say. Can you give us maybe, one or two examples of ideas that came via this channel and that you took on and really, had an impact in the company, that you really thought these are brilliant ideas?
Yeah, I'll give you a couple, but before I do that, I want to say, Ali said something that, I totally agree with you. I think to feel included, you've got to feel listened to, and I've never heard anybody link that to whistleblowing before, but I think she's exactly right. But it also, setting the tone early, You know, if you're at the head of an organization or a function or just a team, you know, asking the new people, you know, telling them, you know, you're going to have many advantages here, but one of them is the fact that you're new. You've got the newcomer's advantage, and I've lost it. I can never get it back, and it's so valuable. You know, I've had people write letters with as tactical things as, you know, in our offices in California, you know, the weather's almost perfect all the time. Why in the world don't we have furniture outside so you can have meetings out there? It's like one of those, duh, that's a really good idea. So we immediately bought furniture and put it outside. All the way to, I've had specific strategic product ideas that came out of these first things that we've launched. So it's a fascinating thing, and I love it. I meet with every new employee, and usually small groups, and most of them write letters.
Love it, love it. So one topic that we just heard is sort of having a fresh look at things, right? And we see all the companies we admire, they're typically always from outside the category, right? It's not Daimler that came up with the best electric car, but Tesla, a guy that didn't know anything about cars, or Airbnb were not hotel guys, and you know, Uber were not taxi guys. It's always the people come from outside that really revolutionize a category. Now, if you take this idea of a fresh look, we should also maybe talk a bit about the customers. We haven't talked a single word about the customer so far. Werner, what do you do to make sure that you and your management team has that fresh look at things from time to time, or at least the customer perspective versus a very much inside out, you know, our products, our services? I mean, can you give us a few thoughts of how you try to do that at Nokia?
Yeah, okay, of course. You know, the thing I like and I have more or less a sales role. So my key responsibility is convincing customers to, let's call it, buy our equipment. But it's not selling equipment which is the key. The key is to understand what the business needs are of the customer, and really understand his strategy. What is he after? What are his objectives? And to figure out if there are some flaws maybe, or if you have other ideas in looking at his strategy. And I think it's a little bit like the outside view. You have to bring an outside view to the customer and challenge him. I think it's not about criticizing, it's about challenging, showing him options, other options than he was thinking about. And really engaging in a dialogue, not trying to sell anything, really to, first of all, to meet his needs, meet his business needs. And I think that's basically the key, and not this typical selling of products, selling of solutions, whatever. I think it's not. It comes afterwards. But the first thing is really to understand how can you connect, how can you bring value to a customer. And I think that the value is really not in agreeing to what he is doing, but really challenging, really figuring out how can you improve his strategy, his business ideas, his products, and so on.
So actually that starts with listening, right? In a way, yeah? Really truly listening. I think that's another huge...
And preparing very, very well. Really, reading a lot about everything you can get about the customer. Really read all the reports, read everything you can find.
Yeah, actually on the list we've seen at the very beginning from the World Economic Forum, in my mind, there were at least two things I missed besides the customer centricity. One is definitely a curiosity, curiosity. And I think Ole, you mentioned a little bit about that when I asked you about Singapore. Do you experience in your leadership practice, Ole, that people are curious enough, also the senior executives, and what would you subscribe, or what would you recommend that we, are staying a bit more curious, and what's going out in the world?
I definitely call myself curious, but I also say it's another word for being nosy. But I do think you have to be hungry. You have to be curious. You have to ask why. And I think just to the point also around customers, it's almost like an obsession, a healthy obsession with your customers, to really get into the detail. I think it was mentioned, we need to get to know the customers or the consumers, like really get into their shoes. And not to make everything about inclusion, but again, if I fully understand my consumer base, my customers, if I fully understand the challenges that they go through, each different group of people, because it's not that one size, one product fits everyone. So if I make the effort to go through the various personas, the various challenges, the various people, if I humanize the consumers, the people that I'm serving, you will then find loads more questions that you can start asking about that particular person's journey, and henceforth the decent fit between the products and the services that you are offering. So I think it's highly, highly important, but also just business sense and savviness to really get to know your consumers and to ask questions all the time, and to never stop the road, never kind of finish, always continuously ask, why is it? Why does it happen like that? Or why shouldn't it happen like that? So I think for me, it's a highly important trait. I think it also links back to innovation. If we are curious to understand, is there a better way of doing this? And it's like, I think Bracken mentioned, when you hear an idea and it seems super, super simple, sometimes the best ideas are really, really simple. And it just took you thinking about something in a completely different way. And again, there's curiosity. There has to be curiosity that drives you to think in a different way, or to put your hand up and say, hey, actually, I think there's a better way of doing this. So I think the ability to actually think in that way yourself, but more importantly, foster the environment for other people, for your teams to create their own ideas, whether or not those ideas go anywhere, whether or not those questions are seen as sensible questions which have any value at the end. But the idea of continuously turning the motions for your team so that they are curious, nosy people, I think is a great way to foster teaming, that kind of family environment, but also creativity and innovation.
Fascinating. Yeah, I think starting with the why question is often a very good idea for innovation. Annabella, I have another question to you, if I may, and it's about dilemmas. I notice more and more it's often management teams are faced with dilemmas also from their boards. Sort of they should always, for example, do simultaneously, cost cutting, but also work, in new business models, or, they should be empathetic, but also highly profitable, and so on and so forth. So stuff that is sort of, at least at first glance, kind of a dilemma. It's not so easy to solve. So can you maybe, or our audience, give some advice how to deal with dilemmas, or how you actually also doing it personally?
Well, I always try to get a holistic point of view on everything that I'm doing, because this just helps me to prioritize the way it should be. So I always reflect, what are we aiming for? What is like the goal that we are setting for ourselves? And then it's easier to judge, is it now more on the cost cutting side, or should we be investing more? And well, we had now all this COVID discussion, and to the Ringier group, 145 companies belong worldwide. So it was I had to decide what is like the most important. And I said, well, now we have to see, do we have enough cash? Is every company has enough liquidity? So this would point out what we are focusing now. And I think it's really important that you always share your ideas in the teams, evaluate them together. What are you aiming for? And then you can fade out those dilemmas more easily. It's about talking.
Yeah, understood. I'm just briefly looking at the panel to see some more questions from you, the audience. Very glad that you keep it interactive. Well, that's kind of interesting one. So it's about, again, personal growth, right? Really looking into you, into your personality, into maybe barriers that you have or patterns that you have. I mean, we all have some of those, right? Some are more helpful, some are a bit less helpful in dealing with topics. So should actually a leader, do this, and how should it do it? Maybe, I don't know, Stefan, do you have a point of view on this?
Yeah, I think
it's not an easy one, but I think it's an interesting one.
No, I think I do. I mean,
yeah, go ahead.
When we accept maybe it's a very simplistic definition that leadership kicks in, of course, comes really to fruition or is required when the gray zones start, when analytics don't provide us anymore with the full solution and so on and so forth. So we can't hide behind, let's say, anything that is that you can almost calculate. Then for me, that is when the leadership is most required. And we have quite a lot of that these days, as we see all over the world. Actually, most of the important stuff has to do with, decision making within increasingly gray areas. Then how do you do that? And the question how to be centered what do you believe in ultimately, such that you are anchored to be able to respond to those questions, find your way in the gray areas. I mean, that's the ultimate thing. Therefore, I have to say, when I encounter people who hold strong views that are based on understandable principles, I prefer that much, even if the principles are maybe not the ones that I believe in personally. I prefer that much to people who sort of become very vague and unclear when it's really about do we go left or right. I mean, that's ultimately when leaders are required. So absolutely, I think it's a totally critical element of having being clearly anchored, having clear beliefs, saying them, being courageous to say them rather than to be careful and beat around the bush and not to sort of get into any conflict. It's again about exposing yourself. Yeah, you expose yourself when you say what you really believe in. I think that's hugely required, and it's ultimately what the leader is the essence of a leader at the end of the day. Yeah.
Right, and I mean, yes. Leaders also that he or she made sort of his or her, let's say, personal homework, right? That you're sort of sound as a person, and as we said in the beginning, self-leadership development, not just as an expert in your field or not just in technical skills, but obviously also in sort of human aspects that are critical. So I would say, looking at the clock, we come to the sort of final round. And if I may start with you, Bracken, over in California, maybe is there something you would sort of give as an advice to our audience when it comes to employability or how to stay relevant, or that you can share from your experience that we may have touched upon yet?
I joined a minute late, but I caught the kind of the middle of Ali's comment earlier on building your own brand, and I think the word that she used that I really like is original, and everybody's original, and being yourself. I think the older I get, the more I realize that it's really important to learn like crazy from all those around you and all those who've done the same kind of job you've done. But it's even more important to do things your way and to think for yourself. I've been very lucky in my career to have a few times, including Logitech, where I arrived and everybody around me was super smart, but somehow the company was super wrong. And so I got to learn from them, but had the permission to be free thinking. And, and I was lucky there. Most of the time you're not. So I would encourage you to always be a free thinker. Always think for yourself. Don't feel like you have to follow the rules. Follow the laws, but not the rules.
That's very inspiring. Werner, your last words, sort of advice to people?
Yeah, I think I mentioned it before. I think the only clear advice is really be alert when an opportunity comes along and take it, even if it looks like a big risk. Take the risk and try it. And either you will learn, anyway you will learn, but it might even be that you fail, but I think that's not the problem. You will learn anyway, and most of the cases, if you put in a lot of energy and put in all of your energy, you will succeed. So don't miss an opportunity and take the risk.
And we also learn from failures. I think a very, very important message here, Stefan.
Not so much to add, really. The one thing I would say that would be a good thing for everyone is to always, and we are losing it increasingly in the society maybe, is try to only always do one thing at a time. Yeah? Do what you do it really, be fully in the conversation, in the theme that you are, rather than having your mind, allowing your mind constantly to really deal with other stuff. It's a difficult thing, but I would find it very important.
Focus, yeah.
It's more than focus. It's really, you know, being yeah. You can call it focus maybe, yeah. But it's probably a little bit more than that.
Okay, get it. Then over to you, Annabella.
Well, just 3 sentences: be bold, be brave, be you.
Very concise. Thank you so much. And Ollie, you can have the famous last words.
Well, I think nicely it probably wraps up everything that people have said already. But the only thing for me to add, I think, is just have some hustle. So I think for me, that's really about perseverance. Whether it's you're innovating, you're coming up with an idea, you don't see somebody who looks like you at the top, whatever it is, just keep going. Have perseverance with what you do, and maybe try and think about a different way of doing something. But ultimately, have that grit to keep going.
Much, all of you in the panel. I think, at least to me, it was super insightful, and hopefully also for you in the audience over there. And then I hand over to you, Tanya, and I think we can move and have a drink.